A lot of what I can see that pertains to AI harms are actually capitalist in nature.
Welcome to Talking Shop, the Communities Inc. podcast. Episode 18. Should I be thinking about AI?
Hi everyone, my name's Shamsha, I'm the Creative Director at Communities Inc. Welcome to our podcast. Today we have Favour, who's from the University of Nottingham. Welcome, Favour. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background first? And we're going to be talking about AI and we'll get to some more detail around that later.
Okay, thanks Shamsha. My name is Favour and I am a PhD student at the University of Nottingham researching Afrofeminist ethics in the design and use of avatars. I'm Nigerian and I came to the UK in 2022 to start my PhD. So I studied law as an undergraduate in Nigeria and I'm trying to figure out what law is as it relates to the design and use of avatars.
Okay, so, AI, artificial intelligence, what does it mean? What is AI? Because I think people might have their own assumptions about what it is, and what do you think it is?
Well, I like that you said, what do I think it is? Because I too have my own subjective definition of it. I suppose, objectively, if I were trying to be objective, technically, I think one could say that artificial intelligence is a branch of computer science that seeks to emulate human intelligence in technology, that seeks to develop technologies that can emulate what human beings determine intelligence to be like in human beings.
Right, okay. And what sort of technologies come under AI then? Sort of what's the range of technologies?
There are very many different types. You have your generative artificial intelligence, which is what is all the rage now, that enables you to apparently, but not entirely accurately, I suppose, generate texts, media, audio, video from prompts generally.
So things like predictive texting and that
Yes.
sort of stuff, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And also stuff like asking it to generate an essay, for instance, like for students. And then you also have facial recognition technologies that are being used at airports or even on your phone to determine if you, for security purposes, for instance, to see if you are really the owner of the device, or if your identity matches what is on your passport, or if you are a wanted criminal, and all that, which is it's all very problematic, I think, facial recognition technology. And then you have emotional recognition technology, which is sort of tied to facial recognition technology, that is used to determine if some people are saying that we will be able to use it to determine if people are being honest or if they are happy or unhappy. And there are various many other types too, I think.
So is that sort of like the realm of lie detectors and things?
Yes. Right. But also, the people I've seen talk about emotion recognition technology for as it relates to AI don't really talk about lie detecting. It's usually spoken of as a tool that can foster social relations. So if you are on a Zoom call, for instance, or on Teams, how do you know if somebody is unhappy or happy? It all seems rather invasive, I think, though. So it's usually said to foster connection rather than lie detection per se.
So, some people listening out there might think artificial intelligence got nothing to do with me, but actually from what you've described, we're already sort of anyone that's got a phone and that does text, we're already sort of interacting with some aspects of it.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes, that what we normally hear about AI is, the robots, is sometimes the negative stuff, some of the scary stuff, some of that fear-mongering. What do you think some of the positives are of AI?
I think a lot of it has to do with why technology itself is good. So I've reading a lot about something called post-phenomenology, which is something I really want to engage with in my research. And post-phenomenologists define technology in terms of tools and tool making and tool design. So when I think about technologies like artificial intelligence, I think of them as artifacts that we have created to enable us to overcome some deficiency or shortcoming of some kind. So clothes, for instance, help us to live in different types of climate and weather conditions. And I think artificial intelligence could potentially ease many aspects of our lives. For instance, when we talk about innovations that enable doctors or health practitioners to predict the risk of breast cancer, for instance, or septicemia, it seems really helpful. I think I'm a big fan of thinking about leisure and pleasure. I'm trying to conjoin them together into pleasure. I don't know. So I feel that artificial intelligence technologies could potentially enable us to have a higher quality of life in terms of drudgery, in terms of high risk work, underwater mining, for instance, high risk surgeries. They all seem like nice things to have.
Yeah, I mean, hospitals are now carrying out operations.
Yes.
Using
remotely
remote tools. I mean, how realistic is, some of the fear-mongering, some of the downsides, how realistic is that? I think most people will think about the Terminator and Skynet and machines taking over. How realistic is some of that stuff?
Well, I think that not very realistic yet.
Okay.
Well, I don't see a lot of that happening yet, because a lot of what I can see that pertains to AI harms are actually capitalist in nature. CEOs of big companies, for instance, trying to increase efficiency while reducing the amount of employees they have so that they can make even more profits. It's people not understanding social context and how surveillance technologies, AI-powered surveillance technologies can inflame tensions in communities. It's people prioritizing innovation at the expense of human enjoyment and human comfort. And maybe eventually all these things will culminate in a Skyrim type environment, but I don't think that is likely to happen anytime soon.
Yeah.
And funnily, I think that some of the tech bosses, for instance, why they keep harping on Skyrim is to distract us from the fact that it is their own vision of AI and how they are developing it that is actually being most harmful at the moment.
So we're not completely ruling it out at the moment.
Well, I never say never. There's a non-zero chance.
Yeah, I guess it's like with any tool, as it were, it can be used to benefit people, or it can also be used to harm people and to create. So really, it comes down to whose hands is this technology in?
Yes, exactly.
And like you say, there's been. I don't think it's anything that we've really thought about, because there's been more hurried conversations over the last year or so within governments around the world around, okay, we need to put some parameters on this so that it doesn't sort of spiral out of control and lead to those harmful consequences.
Yeah.
So in terms of your research, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What's that about?
So I'm looking at avatars, which I am defining broadly to mean digital representations of people and things and non-human animals, I think, generally. So when I started my research, I was really interested in virtual reality, and I wanted to develop an ethical framework for virtual reality interactions. But as I began to speak with my supervisor, I found that what I was most interested in virtual reality were actually avatars. I was interested in how I was able to represent myself and how unable I was to represent certain aspects of myself that I considered important. And I began to see that WhatsApp and Instagram and Reddit and many different platforms were even Teams and Zoom were introducing these features that allow you to use another icon, something cartoony or animated, to represent yourself rather than your real face. And I thought that it all spoke to something being in the air about how we can represent our identities fluidly in digital spaces. But I wanted to focus on what was Afrofeminist about this, what I wasn't seeing in the conversations at the time.
Because we hear about computer programming in particular in terms of the bias that it can have. And I guess it's sort of the same thing that, whoever's creating the existing avatars or the ones that we've had up to date have been created by people that have maybe a certain bias, and that's reflected in what's available.
Yes.
So I guess, what we need is more people involved in this so that we can get a greater diversity that's sort of represented. What's the purpose of avatars? Why do people like avatars?
Well, that's a very good question. Because I have been reading about it, and also because I think avatars are just the latest digital iteration in how we present ourselves in social contexts. So historically, I think people have always loved to try on different identities, and in things like Carnival or Mardi Gras, or at coronations and burial ceremonies, for instance, in Nigeria and all over Africa, you'd find masquerades would come out, and masquerades were usually considered to be ancestral spirits generally who come out at significant moments to mark a significant event. So people would there's a socially accepted fiction that they are spirits of the dead, but they're actually young men usually, because women were not allowed to be masquerades, who would dress up in these attires. You wouldn't be able to see their faces, and they would dance, they would perform acrobatic feats and stuff like that. And then when you think about Carnival in the European Italian sense, it was a time when people would put on masks and pretend to be other than what they are. I remember being my supervisor talking about this, and he was telling me that, two of my supervisors actually, talking about how it was basically a period that would allow people to, in a period of great religious repression, for people from different classes to intermingle and to behave in ways that would generally be socially frowned on. And also outside religious and cultural things. When growing up, I think part of growing up is trying on different characters and personas. The way you behave with your parents isn't necessarily how you behave with your classmates at school, and even as an adult, we all behave differently in different settings. But I think that avatars are especially relevant today because everything is going online very quickly. There's a digital version of everything, and so avatars, I think I would define them as digital artifacts that enable us to express our identity in very visual ways. So I think that's why we like them, because we like pretending, trying on different personas.
Yeah. So it allows us to sort of put our identity into the avatars, but also to try on different identities as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And normally, I mean, when I think of avatars, I sort of think of games.
Yes.
The gaming space. I mean, outside of that, what sort of applications could there be?
Well, outside gaming, if you take my definition, for instance, of an avatar as a digital artifact that is used for visual representation, one could define, and some people do define, your profile picture on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, for instance, as avatars of some kind. In that sense, they are images that allow you to say something about your personality. For instance, on my WhatsApp, and one very interesting thing I found since I came to the UK is that people here use WhatsApp very differently. My WhatsApp is very, very busy. I would say I constantly change my picture all the time, sometimes twice or thrice a week, because I'm trying to communicate something to my followers, my family and friends, my people on my contact list about something, a new dress that I am trying on, or if I'm unhappy about something, or if I'm confused, then there are different representations that I use. But on LinkedIn, because it's a very professional platform, I think the picture there has been there for like a year, and the one before was there for like a year, and the one before was there for like a year, and the one before was there for like years. And because I think, because the professional platform, I want to look my best professionally. And for me, looking your professional best involves going to a studio, for instance, and getting a professional picture, which I do not often have the time or interest in doing. So when I get one, because it's required for me to do, I just put it there for as long as I can. And so I think also when you think about avatars in like Teams, for instance, or Zoom, I think we're getting to a situation where I think due to the impact of COVID and remote work, we are seeing people just being tired. I think people generally are just tired of the effort of having to groom yourself to perfection just to appear in front of a computer screen. So I think all these tools are coming out to enable people to still maintain some sort of professionality, to still present themselves in ways that might be acceptable while not having to exert much effort into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listening to that would certainly be handy for me when I'm doing training first thing in the morning. So if I don't have to put my makeup on and do my hair and clean up the room behind me to make sure that everything's all right in order. So, I mean, essentially, I guess what you're saying is that it's a tool for communication.
Yes.
And it might be about communicating, you know, a certain attitude or approach, or maybe even emotions in terms of how you're feeling. It's interesting you're saying you change your WhatsApp profile every I put a picture of my baby niece on 10 years ago. She's 12 years old soon. She's 13 soon. And that's it. It's the same picture. But I understand what you're saying, because I obviously see people that do change their profiles, and, you know, and some people, or, you know, once they've been on holiday, they'll change their profile.
Yes.
And so they're communicating that, you know, we've been away, or if there's a new baby in the family, they'll put the baby.
Yes.
So it's actually sort of telling a story as well, isn't it?
Yes.
And, you know, you talked about avatars being sort of artifacts, sort of almost like pieces of art.
Yes.
But it's also about sort of representation. What's the relationship between those two?
Between art and representation?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose it all depends on how you define art. I know there are some people who define art to require some skill, for instance, in its creation. But I don't define art that way, probably because I'm not very artistic. I like consuming art, but I don't know how to draw. But so I define, to me, art refers to icons or objects that possess meaning of some kind, that communicates meaning. And I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with beauty, because a common critique of contemporary art is that it's ugly.
Yeah.
But it's still art because it's saying something about its context. So I think that's for the art. And then I suppose representation has to do with, well, I suppose it depends on how you define representation. If it is in terms of how you present yourself as a representation, sort of like the mold that is left behind when you're trying to duplicate something, or the thing that has been created from the mold, and you can think about it in terms of inclusion and diversity and equity, in the sense of there being
I guess it allows for more diversity to be visible.
Yes, more diversity to be visible. So I think in that sense, then we can just bring all those things together to say that I think when we create artifacts or objects that communicate meaning of some kind, it's a type of art, and art itself can enable diversity and inclusion, because we are telling stories, we're allowing stories to be told of many different cultures and contexts.
So in relation to creating an avatar that has multiple identities, because we all do have multiple identities, you know, we all have a gender, a race, but often we don't see all of that reflected. What are some of the challenges in creating an avatar that does have those multiple identities, and it's important for those to be reflected?
So I think there are quite a number of challenges in relation to, well, the visual components of the avatar itself. So stuff like skin color, for instance. Many avatar platforms, for instance, have very limited options in terms of skin. And you'd find that the ones with the most robust design offerings tend not to have mobile versions, so you can't operate them on your phone. You need access to a computer and high-speed internet to be able to design them. And then one thing that struck me as well when I was creating some avatars at the beginning of my research was I couldn't find any with traditional African attire at all. So they were all very Western centric. Because of course the companies creating them are Western companies.
Yeah.
So it's not, I suppose, profitable to them, or it's not of any concern to them, because I suppose the markets they are trying to target is not African. That seems to be a deficiency to me. The same with hairstyles as well. In Nigeria, there are many different hairstyles, and they all have their own names, with meanings. But when you go on these platforms, you just see very generic hairstyles, like as if a non-black person has thought about it and has catalogued, how do black people wear their hair? So you have a bald hairstyle, you can have a bald hairstyle, and then you have a very big afro, and then you have a smaller afro, and then you have some cornrows maybe, and then that would be just about it. Those struck me as challenges in representation in avatar design.
So it sounds like there's a lot of education and awareness to be made in terms of people that are involved in this sector being more aware of the need for the representation of a more diverse group of people than what's currently available. So looking into the future then, sort of going back to AI and, relating to the work that you're doing, what do you see coming up in the future that interests you or gets you excited about something, and what's on the horizon?
With avatars and AI, I think it would be interesting to explore how different people feel about them. I found that people often share or hold very interesting, unexpected beliefs about what an avatar should look like or what AI should be used for. And for instance, I was once told that people in developing countries, for instance, are much more positive. They hold much more positive views than people from the Western world, for instance, regarding technologies. And this has seemed to be my experience as well, because when I think about back home, when people talk about technologies, we're usually quite, suppose, in awe of technologies. We associate technology with development, with better standards of living. But here, people are very critical of technology and it's very common. I've met so many people who just don't, who have willingly decided not to use technology, who don't have online platforms. And it's very confusing to me, but also very interesting. So I'm very interested in exploring why that is. I mean, I feel like I have some ideas about why that is. But I think that when I think about tech developers, on the other hand, they are usually rather optimistic about technology, in toxic optimism, I think is what they possess. I feel very uncomfortable leading all the momentum and the drive that you need in technological innovation to people who are so toxically optimistic. But I also feel uncomfortable about leaving all the critique about technologies to people who are extremely critical of it as well, because that doesn't represent the people and context that I am familiar with. So that's something that I would like to do research in future. And also with avatars, I found in a couple of workshops that some people feel that Black people have said to me that I don't think that an avatar needs to look like me. I don't think an avatar needs to represent everything that resembles me in real life. That when I go into a virtual reality environment or a game, I am trying to escape. I'm trying to enjoy a different experience from what my daily life is like. For me, it's entertainment, it's art, it's media. Why do I need to look like me in this space? And those sorts of questions I find them so fascinating. I find those questions really fascinating because I think lots of people think like this but rarely express those feelings. And I want to discover what other interesting concerns and thoughts people have about technologies and representation generally.
Yeah. But I guess it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's that choice that we talked about earlier. Yes, you can be somebody else, but being somebody else also requires you to have certain characteristics, certain features, certain behaviours or attitudes.
Yes.
Or, you can say, I want people to see me.
Yes.
Like you say, like on, Zoom and Teams and those sorts of platforms, you probably don't want a representation of something that doesn't reflect anything about you at all.
But that's the thing. I mean, I've had people also say to me that if we are developing all these technologies, like if you can go to work in virtual reality, why can't the face you use then also be different? Like, why do you have to dress professionally? Like, why can't I go to work as a green alien, for instance, if I'm working from home anyway? I mean, why does my face matter so much in this space?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think to me it's choice. You have that choice then, don't you?
Yes.
But also, what I'm taking from this conversation is, sometimes when you're looking for an image that represents you and you can't find it, I think most people would just go to the closest thing that's available.
Yes.
But I guess I'm sort of starting to think, we don't have to accept that. We all have a responsibility where we can and where we're able to add to that diversity.
Yes.
And that's the only thing really that's going to enable other people to come on and find somebody that looks like them, that that maybe sounds like them or that reflects them better.
Yes.
So to not just accept what's out there, because it's an evolving industry, like you say, and we're almost just at the beginning of it, really. There's a long way still to go.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for a fascinating conversation. I've learned a lot. I knew I was going to learn a lot on this one. Thank you so much, and good luck in your research. And we'd love to have you back and find out sort of how it's gone when you've completed it. Thank you very much.
I'd love to come back. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Favour.